Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to do a different interpretation on Lignitzer's play number 3. I've already covered this in the past, but I've received some very good information from Yorgos from the Greek Historic Fencing Society, and he provided me with some good text describing the Wechselhau, which is a component of Lignitzer's play number 3. The way I had interpreted the Wechselhau was a very loose translation of any changing cut. So basically, if you're going from one direction and change it into another direction, whether it's high to low, I had interpreted, I interpreted that to mean the Wechselhau. Yorgos showed me some text where it was being translated very specifically as a downward cut. Okay, let me do it with the longsword. So out of the longsword text, he showed me an interpretation of the Wechselhau that showed it to be a downward cut followed by an upward cut. Okay, so a downward cut with an upward cut. Now, before I go any further, let me explain what I do in this channel. And I covered this in my very first video, and that was a while ago. So let me go through that again. What I do in this channel is, I like to study HEMA. HEMA is basically a study of the historical texts. I try to look at them, and what I try to do is I am not a translator. Okay, I don't study historical texts in the sense that I read them in their original languages and try to, do a translation. What I do specifically is I have 16 years of fighting experience, right? So that's on one side, right? And on the other side, I like to read translations and interpretations of historical texts. So what I like to do is I like to basically say, hey, here I have all my years of experience, and now on this side over here I'm reading the text. Let me see how the historical stuff fits in with the stuff that I have been doing, with the practical fighting that I've been doing over 16 years. Because what I have seen is that a lot of the stuff that I do through practical sword fighting follows a lot of the historical stuff. And it kind of makes sense because basically people have two arms, two legs, they move the same way. So it makes sense to me that regardless what source people are using, they're going to arrive, if they're moving in the same way using a similar weapon, they're going to arrive at similar conclusions in terms of how to best use those weapons. Okay, so that's the focus of this channel. That's what I do. I have on the one side I have my practical fighting experience, on the other side I have my study of HEMA, and I try to kind of combine the two, and I try to say, okay, when I'm fighting, this is the way I use that historical stuff. And it's kind of like when you drive. There's two ways you can learn to drive, right? You can look at a driving manual, right? And you can, just without having any knowledge of driving, you can look at the information in the driving manual and then go and apply that to driving a car. Or you can basically take the car, go out, start driving. After a couple of months of driving, a whole bunch of accidents, whatever, you run off the road a couple of times. At some point you'll figure out how to drive straight and not hit things. Well, at some later point in time, you go back and you look at a driving manual and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this stuff that I see in this manual, it resembles the way I actually drive. Okay, so that's what I do in this channel. I come at it from kind of a reverse direction. I've been fighting for a long time, and now I want to apply the stuff that's in the manuals to a way that I already know how to fight and see how the two kind of fit in. So, it's HEMA, but it's like approaching it from a different direction, okay? So, with the Wechselhau, the way it's I've seen people do it mainly holding the sword here, cutting down, cutting up. In practical fighting with a two-handed sword, the way I've always done it is when I cut down, I use the push-pull of the lever. So I'll cut down, cut back up, right? And usually if I'm cutting back up, it is usually in a defensive nature. So if I cut down, usually there'll be an incoming blow. I'll usually come up to catch the blow. Okay, so when I use this Wechselhau with a two-handed sword, it's usually in a defensive nature in the sense that I've cut down and I'm coming back up. Okay, so that's how I use it. Now, in Lignitzer's play number 3, he seems to be using it offensively. Okay, so he's using it not in a defensive manner. So let me put this sword down. Because in the play, you know, he basically says from the Wechselhau, right? So he wants you to cut down, and then it says from there, strike the left side of his head. So that would imply an upward cut, right? Then a wind with a thrust to the face, and then he says cut the leg. Okay, so I think that is the conventional interpretation, right? That most people would have, right? He says from the Wechselhau, so you cut down, right? Then you make a straight upward cut, thrust in, cut the leg. Okay, quick. Now, from my personal fighting experience, okay, what I have found, especially with a single-handed sword and a buckler, if you cut down, okay, you're usually going to get hit in the head. Okay, if you bring your blade that far down. So basically, I think you'd have to come to the long point. So from here to come up here, I mean, yes, you can do it. Now, practically speaking, I don't think that accomplishes a whole lot, because the purpose of this Wechselhau is to be deceptive, to change quickly so that you deceive the other person. Okay, so with a one-handed sword, okay, cutting down and then just raising your arm up to cut up, I don't think it's going to accomplish that. But there's a way that I have practiced it, and I have seen other people practice this very successfully. That works and still follows those instructions that we see in Lignitzer. Okay, so with Lignitzer, he says basically, do from the Wechselhau, so he's cutting down, right? So what I've done, I've still made that cut, but what I've done is I've wrapped it around my hip. Okay, so and I've got my buckler up here for defense, right? So that's blocking. Now, obviously, you have to manage your range, okay? Because you have to do this from a distance where you're not going to get hit in the head. So managing your range, you cut down, wrap it around your hip, step up, and strike. So to me, that seems to serve a purpose. The purpose being that, yes, it is deceptive, right? But it's also quick enough to be effective. So as you come over here, because at this, I'm still relatively out of range here. Then from here, as I step in, I strike, okay? And then from this position, I can wind up, thrust, cut to the leg. But let's focus a little bit on the Wechselhau and how I'm doing this and what it's accomplishing. Because what I'm doing is, as I'm coming around, I'm wrapping it around here, all right? From this position, and this really resembles the first guard, right? I'm coming into the first guard. So as I'm coming around here, I'm bringing it to the first guard, and then I'm whipping my hip, hitting with the back edge. Now, as I'm hitting with the back edge, okay, by whipping the hip, I'm giving it enough speed, but by coming with the back edge, I'm also basically turning because with the back edge, you can see how I can really get behind that blade. So this is covering me, this is my defense here. This is something that I have learned as the reverse wrap, okay? This is a reverse wrap. It's wrapping around. Normally when we think of a wrap or a Wechselhau, you're wrapping around this side, okay? Well, this is wrapping around that side. And you can see how as I come around, flip it, you can see how that has the ability to come all the way around. So the Wechselhau, as I'm reading it now, is accomplishing what I have experienced or what I have practiced in fighting as a reverse wrap. Okay, so from here, step around, right, and you can see how it can strike with some significant damage because I'm putting my hip into it. What I'm not doing, okay, I'm not lifting my blade up and simply striking with the back edge. Okay, what I'm doing is from here, I'm giving the blade speed. And I'm using the centripetal force of the blade. So by whipping the sword around here, right, all the power is generated from down here. So at the point that the blade comes over here, I'm just letting it go. Okay, if I were to let go of the sword, I mean, it would fly up there into the trees, right? So from here, I'm able to make that cut with some authority, right, and some speed. Okay, so this seems to really fall into line with a lot of the other stuff, because basically you're coming into that first guard, right? So from that first guard, so from here, I strike down, all right? I come into this guard, right? And then as I step, I can turn it in, and you really don't, you know, the reason why I'm saying step is because you kind of have to be out of range a little bit if you're going to be in this position here, so you don't get hit, because obviously this is not offering a lot of defense. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it from out of range, then step in, turn it, do my wind, cut to the leg, okay? Now, Lignitzer says do it on both sides, which is interesting because there's two ways you can see it. Is he telling us to, because he says to cut with the long edge to the right leg, okay? So the question becomes, well, is he saying cut to the left leg instead, right? Because that's one way of interpreting that, right? You can say that when he says do it on both sides, what he's doing is, what he's telling us is to make this Wechselhau cut, okay, thrust, and then instead of cutting to the back leg, bring it in to hit the other leg. That's a possibility. But I think he's saying do the whole thing completely on the other side. So instead of striking a diagonal blow to the right, because now I'm cutting down diagonally towards my left side, right? I'm going to cut to the other side now. So from the other side, if I'm going to cut, okay, same idea. As the sword comes back here, I'm going to follow it back with the back edge, right? So if I cut to this side, I'm going to bring it back here, and then follow it around. Okay, so basically this is what they call a J hook, it's another wrap shot basically. All right. So as I cut down, I'm going to let the sword come out, and then from here, rip it around. And as you can see, because I'm using the centripetal force, I'm able to use a lot of speed. The blade has to move fast enough so that the other guy can't see it. So if you're going through this slow, right? If you're doing this like here and then up like that, well, they can see that blade. That's not going to accomplish much. It has to be fast enough so that they really can't see the tip like that, right? That's because the sword's all about speed, right? This is a weapon of speed. So on the other side, right, I'm going to cut down, wrap up this way, okay? Thrust up, okay? And then he says cut to the leg, okay? So again, as I'm cutting to the leg, obviously I'm using my buckler to cover my head. Let me do the cut on this side just so that you can see the sword action. So as I cut down, I bring the sword up here, and then from there, again, I'm using my hips. I'm basically, and the sword doesn't come out here, right? So when I make this cut, as I cut down, the sword is not coming out here and turning. I am turning the sword, close to my body, right? So as it comes in, I'm turning close to my body, right? You can see how the blade, comes in, and then comes in tight and comes around. So when he says do it in reverse, this is my interpretation. Come in, wrap it around there, do your thrust, cut to the leg. Okay, so let me put this down. So I think this is really interesting. I think this Wechselhau adds a very interesting dimension to historical fighting. Okay, so because it adds deception. It's all about deception here. And to me, all advanced fighting is about deception. And that's in ancient combat as far as modern combat as well. Okay, all modern combat is about deception, whether it's individual combat or if you're moving troops around. Right, you want to convince people you're going to be on one side so you can attack them somewhere else. So the Wechselhau brings that element into historical fighting. So it's really interesting for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up, share it. I'll talk to you guys soon.